Welcome to Passages Pulse, where we track the heartbeat of Israel and the Middle East from a Christian perspective. In a time of confusion, division, and misinformation, we're here to help you cut through the noise with truth, clarity, and conviction.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Passages Pulse. Today is Monday, March 9th. Big news right off the bat is that Olivia is back with us, and she has a story to tell, which we'll get to in a moment. But welcome back, Olivia. How does it feel to be back in the seat for your next podcast episode?
Thanks. I'm so glad to be here. It feels great. I got a nice background now. We're doing great.
Yeah. Where are you right now? You're in a different location.
Yeah. I am in Texas right now.
Okay. All right, Tel Aviv to Texas. Obviously, something's changed. We're going to jump into that in just a moment. I do want to just sort of set the stage for our listeners very briefly. The war is now about a week and a half old. Of course, I'm referring to the war between the United States and Israel with Iran. It doesn't necessarily look like it's slowing down. A lot has happened, but things continue to happen at a pretty fast pace. So, of course, there's a lot going on that we could be talking about. We'll give a brief update in a few minutes about top line highlights, what you need to know right now. But for today, we're actually going to do something a little bit different, and that is try to welcome back Olivia by giving her a chance to tell a bit of her wild tale of how she managed to get from Tel Aviv to Texas in the middle of a war. So let's jump right into that, because I have a feeling there's a lot here for us to unpack. Olivia, let's just start right at the top. Where were you when the war started, and where were you supposed to be?
So I was actually standing in Ben Gurion Airport, like in the line to check my bag when the first siren went off at like 8:15 on the 28th. So for a little backstory, I had those tickets booked for months in advance. I've been traveling to Israel predominantly full time for the last like 6 months. And I had booked a ticket to come home and spend some time with family. And my boyfriend, who actually lives in Israel, he has been in and out of reserves for the last 2 years. He decided to come visit my family with me for the first time. And I was going to go visit his family as well. So we had this whole trip planned. We planned it all out. Yeah, super exciting. And we weren't able to get on the same flight because it was going to be crazy expensive. I'd booked mine way in advance and he booked a couple weeks out. So he ended up having to book a flight that was about like 6 a.m. on the 28th. And so mine was supposed to leave at 11. His flight made it out. Mine did not. So I'm standing at Ben Gurion and the first siren goes off. And obviously, you know, in that moment, like your whole body sort of floods with adrenaline. And also, you know, your brain, I think when you get to the airport, naturally your brain's sort of in this like, okay, we're leaving, like this is the moment, you know, you're in that transition in your mind, and then to have it like cut completely short and be like, okay, now I have no clue how long I'm going to be here for. And also my boyfriend is on a plane to Madrid right now for his connecting flight, has no service. And so I had no way of telling him any of what was happening. So thankfully his roommate, I know, right? So I'm like, I don't know what to do. He's
blissfully unaware. Yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't realize this until after he landed, obviously, but apparently somebody on the plane behind him said something like, oh my God, we're at war with Iran. And he, obviously not having access to his phone, was like, oh, well, I really hope she made it out. And then he landed and found out that I didn't. And he was like, oh, that really sucks. So poor guy had to wait like 2 hours before he could contact me after hearing that, which sucks for him. But, you know, the first siren goes off. And, you know, in my mind, I guess my first thought was, okay, well, obviously my flight's going to get canceled. Obviously, airspace is closed. They're starting to evacuate the airport. But at that point, I wasn't sure whether or not Iran had launched the first strike or if Israel had. So I think the initial panic was like, okay, is Israel being caught off guard right now? Because if so, then that's a much bigger deal. That's going to be a much like larger volley of missiles. And so that was definitely my first concern. And then as soon as I opened my phone, I saw that Israel had launched the first strike, which I was like, okay, praise God that that's the way that this is unfolding. And thankfully, my boyfriend's roommate found out that I was stuck at the airport, and he came and picked me up and took me back to their apartment. And by the time my boyfriend landed and caught up with everything, we knew that it made no sense for him to stay in Madrid and wait for me, because we had no clue how long airspace was going to be closed for. And, he wasn't going to be able to get back to me anyways. So he just decided to go ahead and take the flight to DFW and go meet my family and hang out with them until I could join them in the States. And, meanwhile, for the time being, airspace was closed, all the flights had been canceled, and then the airport was evacuated. So I knew that I also wasn't going to get out for a little while either. So that's where I was when the war started, and I was technically supposed to be on a flight to Texas.
Right, right. I just have to say, I hope you don't mind me inserting my own commentary on which bits of this story I like the most.
Please do.
But yeah, I do feel like it's important that I weigh in on one thing. I got to be honest. I mean, I was concerned for your safety, of course. We all were on the team, and we're very glad that you're safe, Olivia. But there also was a small part of me that was putting myself in your boyfriend's shoes throughout this entire situation. And I just found it comical. I mean, I laughed out loud several
It's true.
times thinking about the prospect of showing up at your girlfriend's parents' house in another country, no less, and, ringing the doorbell saying, "Hello, so nice to meet you. I'm so sorry I left your daughter in a war zone. Can I stay with you for a few days while we figure this out?" I mean, just the irony and the humor. I thought that was very funny.
Yeah,
And
poor guy.
I know he had a good time with your parents, so it's fine. But it was just funny to me. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to add any color to that bit of the story, but that little bit that you shared with me while you were still in Israel, I thought that was so funny. Anything you want to add, or should we continue? Because of course there's a whole part of how you got out to get to.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, that's a whole thing in itself too. But yeah, no, it was, I think, it sucked for him because he would have done anything to have like traded places, but then like, what's he gonna do,
Sure.
realistically? And so, he made the right call, but then it was sweet. My mom was like sending me pictures while I'm like in the bomb shelter of like, they're both at his computer, like trying to figure out if they can like book me a flight out through here or through there, or like what they can do. And he's like teaching my dad how to like disassemble his gun and clean it. And I'm like, by the time I show up, I'm going to be the one third wheeling. Like, you guys have already like all bonded throughout this situation. They're passing the time and like worrying about me and bonding through that way. So it was really sweet. I was glad they got the time together, but it was definitely like, what a story to like tell other people. It's actually so crazy.
Yeah. No, it really is. So I do want to, before we get to the journey part of the story, which is a whole saga just by itself, I am curious to hear a little bit more about your experience staying in Israel for the first couple of days of the war. I think, if I'm not mistaken, this was not your first time being there during a siren, but perhaps the first time hearing multiple sirens. So what was your impression of the first couple of days of the war being in Israel during that time?
Yeah. It's interesting because I've been to Israel, since October 7th so many times. Like, I was there in November 2023, December 2023, January 2024, and then like multiple times after since then. So the interesting part is, I don't know what it is, but every single time I left an area during the significant portion of time where there were missiles being launched directly from Gaza into Israel, I was conveniently like, I would leave a place and then like within an hour after I had left, sirens would be going off at that location. So I never really experienced a siren until I think July of last year. I was in Tel Aviv at a cafe with one of my friends, and all of our phones went off and the sirens started going off, and it was a missile that had been launched by the Houthis. And it sounds crazy to say, but like the energy when everybody knew that it was the Houthis firing a missile, nobody really acted with very much urgency, just because the joke was that they always got shot down before they entered Israeli airspace. So I remember there was like a family that was sitting at a table at the cafe, and when everybody else got up to like go to the shelter in an alleyway, that family didn't even move. They were just like, we're like, it's the Houthis, like, come on, be real. So the situation wasn't really as intense. Wasn't that, there wasn't that feeling of like fear that I had that first time that I heard a siren. Whereas with this, and this well, the buildup for this war has been going on for weeks, if not months. And, Trump made an announcement 10 days before that he would, have decided, we'd know in 10 days what he decided on Iran. And then I did the math when he said that, and I was like, 10 days from now is the 28th. I remember making a joke to my boyfriend being like, what are the odds we're going to be here? Like we'll get out barely. And then on the 27th, Mike Huckabee made that announcement that all non-essential embassy staff should, if they would like to leave, should leave by that day. So I think the attitude and the feeling in Israel right before was that everybody knew that something was going to happen soon, even if they didn't necessarily know exactly when. And so for how that felt for me, I think by the time that I got from the airport to my boyfriend's apartment, there were a few hours where Iran hadn't launched retaliatory missiles yet. Like there was a few hours of silence where I was like, okay, what do I need to do? I need to like get some groceries. Like I need to make sure that we have food that's like easily accessible. I also hadn't really slept that much the night before. So I'm like, okay, if I can, like now's the time that I need to sleep and to try and like catch up on things. Also, I was trying to communicate with everybody at work and being like, hey, I'm stuck here by the way. So like, just if you don't hear from me for a little while, like I'm working on other things right now. So,
Olivia
you're dealing
can't
with
come to
all
the
that.
phone right now.
Yeah, sorry. Like I'll get to you as soon as I can. And then, after those few hours, I think it was around 10 in the morning when Iran started launching retaliatory missiles, and those from that point forward, I want to say with the exception of like maybe maybe 2 different periods of lull where there was like a few hours of nothing, from that point I'd say the sirens were going off every 15 to 30 minutes, and their apartment is on the 4th story of the apartment building. It's on the top floor. So that means every 15 to 30 minutes, you're going all the way down 4 flights and all the way up 4 flights. And so not only are you like, yeah, actually, my Oura ring was like, you've hit your step goal for the day. I was like, thanks so much. I'm sure I have. And so, like at that point, you're trying to get sleep. You know that it's going to be interrupted. You're physically exhausted. You're mentally exhausted. And then you're also full of adrenaline at the same time. So even though you want to sleep, your body just won't let you. And that's, I think, an experience that I've never really had before. And so that was really like just such a surreal experience because I've heard, my boyfriend's a combat soldier and he's talked about that feeling multiple times. And even though you can understand and sympathize with something, it's very different when you are the one you actually experience it yourself and you're like, oh, that's what that's like. Yeah. That makes sense. And yet at the same time, I think something that was, interesting to see, and it feels weird to say cool to see, but people are resilient because they have to be. Israelis are resilient because they have to be. And so, I think people understand that this is more than just about me and my experience and really anybody's experience in Israel, because this is about changing the future of the Middle East. It's about dismantling a regime that has killed so many innocent people and about helping a people who have been terrorized by the Islamic regime for over 50 years. So even though I'm sitting in this like adrenaline fueled state, there is a part of me that is like, I'm so thankful that we were the ones to launch that first strike, that we are now taking part in something that is hopefully going to change the future of the Middle East for the better. And I think that's sort of the attitude that all Israelis had as I was interacting with them there.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. That makes a lot of sense. I think it definitely sounds a lot like other experiences that we've had when people have been in country when a war starts or when the sirens start going off. For those listening who are not as familiar with the sirens and what they sound like, if you're from the DFW area, like Olivia, you'll know this very well. The sound of a tornado siren. I'm from the Midwest, also know the sound very well. It's basically the same thing, maybe a little bit louder, and it just is basically that's your sound. When you hear what sounds like a tornado siren, you know it's time to go find a hardened space, a room, shelter of some kind set aside for those situations. And it is really interesting hearing you sort of compare it to the situation with the Houthis last year. I remember I was in the country for a period over the winter. I want to say maybe was it winter of 25, must have been January 25, must have been something like that. Or maybe it was spring of 2025. I forget. But there was a period early 2025. I was there. There was a fair amount of Houthi activity, and the amount of cartoons and memes about how Israelis really felt about the Houthis was again pretty comical, because it kind of got to a point where you did sort of get tired of it. It was a nuisance more than it was an actual danger. What's fascinating about obviously conflicts with Iran, it's very different, and the biggest difference has been the number of missiles that they could fire at any one time makes it more dangerous. It means that at any given point, almost the entire country could, in theory, be hearing sirens at the same time, which isn't really true when the Houthis fire a single missile. It also means that realistically, actual danger is more present when Iran's firing, dozens of missiles at a time as opposed to the Houthis firing one or two at a time. So
Right.
it is a very different experience. I think one of the early takeaways from this first week and a half of the war, though, is that honestly, it sounds like things in Israel are reaching a point where, yes, of course, there are a lot of sirens and they are still dangerous, the missiles, but it's on a spectrum, it's sliding more towards where things were with the Houthis last year than where things were with Iran last year, in the sense that the Iranians are firing fewer missiles at a time, still dangerous, still have to take it very seriously, but it's not quite as aggressive or intense as it was June of last year, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it is interesting to sort of compare where we are as compared to where we were this time last year, the overall situation.
Yeah.
Now, I want to
great
ask you,
point.
Olivia, how did you get home? I mean, I know you were stuck there for a couple of days, and I know that the whole time you were trying to figure out how you were going to get home because your boyfriend is just sitting in your living room talking to your parents, waiting
Yeah.
for you to come home. Yeah, still find that
Crazy.
it's hilarious. It's never not going to be hilarious. But the process of getting home was also not short. So would you like to maybe give us I don't know how much detail you want to give, a rough timeline of the process of getting home to the DFW area?
So, it's like such like a crazy story in so many ways. Like even the way that I found out how I was going to get out of Israel was crazy because I had heard of groups leaving through, through Jordan, through Egypt. I feel like that's the classic, like typical route that people take when they're trying to leave Israel and airspace is closed. And I was just really uncomfortable doing that as a woman traveling alone. If my boyfriend would have been with me or if I would have been with somebody else, even another girl, I maybe would have felt safer doing that, but I just didn't want to take that risk on my own. So I was on Instagram in between going to the bomb shelter, and somebody that I know on Instagram had posted a story that was a phone number of a guy who was leaving via boat from the marina in Herzliya to Cyprus. And I was
I would have
like,
assumed scam. Anytime someone posts a phone number on Instagram, I'm like, scam.
no,
It's got to be.
Josiah, I gave a random Israeli man who I'd never met before my credit card information via the phone. I was like, this is,
man.
am I going to get, I was so sure that I was going to get scammed. But I was like, you know what?
Yeah.
I'm just going to roll with it. Like, I've heard of plenty of other people doing this. I had some trust in the way that it was all working. And, the person I was communicating with via WhatsApp, like sent me, it was an organization of like, they were renting these boats out. And so these guys had done this before, I think during the last Iran war. So that I think gave me a little bit more confidence, but still the concept of just like calling somebody and giving them your credit card information to get you on a boat from Israel to Cyprus is just like the craziest thing. But I did that. And, I think the interesting thing was like, it was obviously a decision I didn't make lightly. Like, even though it seems like a no brainer that, my boyfriend's meeting my parents for the first time across the world and I was supposed to have left and I had that flight booked for months. It wasn't like I was trying to flee Israel, like at the moment the war started, because I had no clue. But Israel, and, this is my opinion, but I also know many people who agree, Israel's really the only place in the world that when bad things happen, you want to run towards it rather than away from it. And leaving can make you feel like a traitor in some ways because it sounds so illogical. But in some way, it's easier to be in a bomb shelter with your friends than being halfway across the world and worrying about them. And I didn't take that decision to leave lightly at all. But I also recognized, my boyfriend's meeting my parents for the first time, and that's a really big deal. And I also really want to be there for that. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to try, like the first thing that comes out, I'm going to try and see if I can make it out, because I'd been hearing from people that, airspace might not be open until at least March 15th, if not later. And I was like, okay, well, that's like so far away. And I'd also been planning to go and visit his family as well. I had my flights booked for that, my domestic flights booked for that. So I was like, okay, I'm going to try and make it happen. So I book this boat ride with there were several other people that were going. And before we leave, I tell my parents, because the captain had told me and everybody else on the boat, he's like, just so you know, there's no Wi-Fi on this boat. So you're not going to have signal for at least 24 hours. So you're not going to be able to contact anybody. So like, let everybody know now that you want to know that they might not hear from you from 24 hours. So I reached out to my family, to my boyfriend. I was like, hey, just so you guys know, 24 hours, you're not going to hear from me. And you might not even be able to track my location. We go on this boat ride. Everything was actually great. Like the people on board were very, very friendly, and the captains were very, very nice, and the boat itself was beautiful. And it wasn't a huge boat, but it was a 41-foot sailboat. It was a nice boat. And I had this like little room to myself, and for the first few hours I just slept. I just passed out because I was just so exhausted from having gotten essentially no sleep up until that point. And everything was fine until in the middle of the night. I did not know this, Josiah, you probably knew this, but I did not realize that Israel has gas pumps or gas drills in the water between Cyprus and Israel. And Iran decided
natural gas fields.
Yeah, so I learned so much information on this boat ride, one of which being that they had that. No clue.
What a way to get a geography lesson.
Right. They're like, and to your left, you'll see these natural gas drills, which, by the way, Iran has decided to launch missiles at, and they're being intercepted by the U.S. so that they don't hit the drill pumps in the ocean. And
well, the other reason, Olivia, is that the Ford, I don't know if you knew this or they told you this or not, but the USS Gerald Ford, the aircraft carrier, had been posted off of the coast of Haifa prior to the operation starting. So there also was a carrier group that the U.S. was trying to protect in the Eastern Mediterranean Sea at the same time as well. You were taking a boat through some interesting waters, I should say.
Yeah,
during that portion
I
of your
should have
journey.
called you before I got on this boat. I had no clue about any of this. I was just like, oh yeah, like it'll be, like a 24-hour ride, like everything will be fine.
Just a nice little day in the boat.
Yeah, chill. Then there are fireworks overhead, and what's that?
Yeah.
It's Iran. And then the Israeli Navy was yelling at us on the radio, being like, you guys can't be here. You have to go 10 miles in the other direction to go around it. And so that turned what was supposed to be 24-hour boat ride into over 30 hours, which then my poor, sweet parents, I'm of course like, I can't contact them. There's nothing I can do. So I'm just sitting there knowing full well that they probably think I'm like dead at the bottom of the ocean, and there's nothing I can do about that. And so I just have to wait. And eventually we get close enough to the island that one of the guys on the boat, his phone starts being able to make phone calls out. So he's calling all of his family being like, hey, I'm fine. My phone, for whatever reason, won't send a call. Like I can't call out. So I borrowed his phone. I called my dad twice. No answer. I think it's because he has like a spam filter on his phone. So it just like didn't go. Don't think his phone even rang. And I was like, what are the odds my boyfriend would pick up if I'm calling from an unknown number? He also just put in an American SIM in his phone. So he has like that new American number. So I was like, let me just try. And so I call him and he answers. And apparently I was so delusional at this point. It took me 3 tries to enter my dad's phone number, which if you know me, my dad's phone number is the first number that I memorized as a kid. Like I know it by heart. I've always known it. It's never been a question to me. I was so delirious. I could not remember my dad's phone number. But my boyfriend had sent his phone number in our group chat. And so I copied, pasted it, put it into my cell phone. And I called him, and he told me later, he was like, I didn't recognize your voice because you sounded so, like, it did not sound like you. You sounded so delirious. And so call them, let them know I'm okay. I get off the boat. I love land, by the way, not built to be a pirate, not my calling by any means whatsoever. I love solid land. I don't want to get on a boat for the time being for a very long time. Anyways, long story long, I get off the boat, find out that all of my flights had been canceled because, as you know, Iran had also been launching missiles onto Cyprus in general, not just into the water. And so even though those missiles had never landed in Cyprus, as far as I'm aware, they canceled a lot of the flights going out, especially the British Airways flight, because they were targeting a British base, and that's what I'd booked my flight on. So I land and I find out that my flight's been canceled, and that I'm probably going to have to spend several days on the island. And I was like, I can't do that. Like, I'm so done with the situation. I'm like, I'll do whatever I need to do. So I instead decided to cross to the Turkish side of the island on foot,
Mm-hmm.
crossed the Turkish border at 2:30 in the morning with my it was very weird. I was like, this is such a crazy situation. Then got to the airport. Then I took a flight from there to Istanbul, and then Istanbul to DFW. So
wait, hang on. Let me stop you 1 second.
yeah.
Question. So the details matter just so we can form like an accurate mental picture in our minds. When you're crossing the border at 2:30 in the morning, I'm assuming you're going through passport control, all that fun stuff. How much luggage did you have with you? And this may not seem that significant, but it feels like a significant detail in terms of like how hard is it to cross the border into Turkey at 2:30 in the morning?
It's such a good question. I decided, when all this happened, I was like, if I get an opportunity to leave, I'm not taking. I had like a big checked bag that I'd taken with me because obviously I'd been in Israel for roughly the last 6 months, so I had all of my stuff there. And so I was like, okay, I'm not taking any of that if I have an opportunity to go. It's too much to carry.
Okay.
I'm not going to do that. So I had a backpack and then like a separate bag that I'd taken with me with like a change of clothes and some of my toiletries and stuff like that. Because I usually tend to, I don't know about you, but I always end up on a canceled flight. So I tend to travel with me as though I'm going to get
Yep.
stranded for at least a day in one place.
Mhm.
And so I had already had all that planned. And then when we were crossing the border, thankfully I just had like two things on one on each shoulder. So, but everybody else I was with had like full roller bags and they're like rolling all of their stuff. I was like, I'm so glad I
Oh my.
didn't do that personally. That could not be
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
But
So you're in Istanbul. Is it straight from Istanbul to DFW, your next flight? Or
yeah, praise God. I was like, if I have to have a layover in JFK, I might riot. Like this is going to be a problem. So yeah, it ended up being a direct
okay.
flight from Istanbul to DFW. The Istanbul airport's beautiful. It was
Mhm.
really great. I had like a little bit of time to sort of like collect myself and update people because at this point word has spread. My friend group knows, my friend's friend group knows, like everybody's reaching out to me asking me questions about everything, which is very, very sweet that everybody was so concerned. But I mean, the bright side is that that by the time I landed, my parents and my boyfriend had obviously had a lot of bonding time between worrying about me and trying to communicate with me and planning things for me. And the other bright side I think too is that like talking about being in Israel during a war, it can feel wrong in a way because I in no way ever want to seem like I'm glamorizing the experience or trying to make it seem special or unique because this is something that Israelis go through on a regular basis. And I got a very like short term but concentrated experience of what our friends in Israel experience consistently and on a regular basis, unfortunately. But what I do know is that there's, a lot of non-Jews and Christians like you and me who have never heard these things before, have never heard stories of what it's like to be in Israel even for a short period of time during war. And so I think my hope in sharing all of this is that we can better model Romans 12, which says, to rejoice with those who rejoice and to weep with those who weep. And although I would obviously never wish or recommend this experience to anybody, it has certainly given me a much greater respect and understanding of not just Israel as a country, but of the people that I care about who live there.
Yeah. It's a really beautiful point. I think we'll wrap up this part of our conversation in a moment because it's a lot to take in, all the different different legs of your journey and whatnot, and want to give you a break, Olivia. But I think one of the things that you said, and I wanted to just briefly return to in a moment, was there's something pretty remarkable about knowing that there is a war happening in a specific place and running to it and not away from it, which is pretty normal for most Israelis when there's a round of conflict. The first thing usually that is established is not so much emergency evacuation as it is emergency return for those who need to be able to return, then emergency evacuation, and then normal travel is sort of the usual order of operations. And that's pretty remarkable that you have a society in which people want to be with their community where something is happening, something bad is happening, as opposed to running away from it. It says a lot about other societies, frankly. I mean, if I'm just sort of putting our own American society under the microscope, I
Yeah.
don't know how unified our country is at this moment, if people would voluntarily choose to return if we were attacked rather than finding a way to flee from danger. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't
it's
feel
very
like I have a
true.
good answer to that. A good read on, are we still that tight knit, unified a country? Is there still that degree of collective pride in our country that people could actually rally for a moment like that, run towards danger instead of away from it? I think I would like the answer to be yes. More recently, there's been some cracks, obviously, in our national sense of cohesion, and it's something that might be a bit concerning, but something
Mhm.
certainly to think about. And Olivia, is there anything else you want to share about your story? Because again, I want to give you a break in a moment, but anything that you want to add as far as closing notes about your
Yeah. I mean, I think the only other thing is just that Israel, I mean, I've said it before, but it is one of those places that is hard to leave during times like this. And I think, my boyfriend and I have both had moments where we've looked at each other and been like, what if we could just be there, volunteering or doing something, like, just anything that we could do to be helping. And even while we're here, figuring out ways to help our friends there. And that is something that I don't take for granted, that you and I have been welcomed into that community, and we are loved in such a way that Israel is a place that feels like a second home. And so the only other thing I'd say is that I'm super honored and blessed that that is a reality that I get to live every day. And even though I'm not there physically, I'm there with my whole heart right now.
Yeah, no, that is very well said. And I think I share that sentiment in a lot of ways. Obviously, very, very glad that something is being done to confront the regime in Iran, but also obviously very concerned for safety of people we know in the region, whether it's our Israeli friends, our Palestinian friends, or men and women in the U.S. armed forces. Bittersweet knowing that something is being done to confront evil, but there's a price to be paid for that, even
Yeah.
if it is simply having to run to the shelter several times a day, and very grateful for those who are paying that price. I want to close this conversation by just giving a brief update as far as where we are right now, a week and a half into the war. We're not going to do a deep dive on the issues today because we wanted to focus on just giving Olivia a chance to tell her story, but I also want to give you just a brief update and sneak peek as far as some issues that we expect to be important over the coming days and weeks that we will be coming back to in future episodes. So if you haven't been paying a whole lot of attention over the past couple of days, here are the top highlights that you're going to want to know about, I think. First of all, Khamenei's son, Moshtaba, is the new supreme leader of Iran. That's relatively recent news within the last 24 hours, if I'm not mistaken. And that's big news. He's been compared to, I've heard different Israeli analysts compare him to Rehoboam, which I think is very interesting. Rehoboam, son of King Solomon, not a very good king of Israel. He was very famous actually for a line in which he's being confronted by various advisors and urged to show some mercy to the people of Israel. And his response basically is a famous line: "If my father scourged you with whips, I will scourge you with scorpions." In other words, he was going to be even more strict and harsh than his father was as a king. And of course, it ends disastrously for Rehoboam. But the analogy is really quite interesting that that's how people are sort of thinking about and processing Khamenei's son, Moshtaba, becoming the new supreme leader of Iran, is that he is, in effect, a person who probably is even worse than his father in terms of his capacity for motivation towards cruelty, the level of corruption that he represents. And at a more macro level, probably what this means is that the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or the security establishment in Iran is very defiant right now. This is not an indicator that they intend to surrender or negotiate anytime soon. If anything, they intend to sort of sideline some of the political elite and double down on this war, which is quite interesting. And we'll come back to that in future episodes to talk about what are the implications and what does that mean, of course, for the future of this war and post-war Iran as well. Another big thing that you're going to want to know about is Israel has begun a ground operation in Lebanon. And I think that's not so surprising. What is a little bit more surprising, and again, hopefully we'll have time to unpack this more at some point, is that the government of Lebanon appears ready to take a stand against Hezbollah and forcibly disarm it or criminalize its operations, military operations. The armed forces of Lebanon, not so much. Don't seem like they're really quite ready to take that stand or are up to the task of disarming Hezbollah. So Israel is, of course, back in Lebanon fighting to dismantle another part of Iran's network in the Middle East there. There have been some pretty significant military accomplishments, honestly, far too many to list during a podcast episode, the various things that have been done or accomplished. But I guess the weird silver lining is that there is time to talk about those things because the war is not over yet and is probably not going to be over soon. So there, of course, will be more things that we'll probably discuss at some point, whether it's different technological advancements or different targets in Iran. And what does it all mean? There's a lot there I think we'll try to come back to at some point. I will note for now that Iran continues shooting, of course, at Israel and has killed 2 people in central Israel in the last day or so. They also continue to shoot at the Gulf states, who are still taking the brunt of the impact. The president of Iran came out with a statement basically apologizing for Iran's military activity targeting different Gulf states like the UAE or Qatar or Saudi Arabia or whatever, and promising that it wouldn't happen again. And then in a few hours it happened again, which again is one of a few different signals that the political elite in Iran are sort of being sidelined and the security elites are basically running the show at this point and doubling down. So there's not much that has changed there and is going to continue to, I think, be an issue that will have some pretty long-term impacts, I would imagine, if there continues to be this conflict directly between Iran and these different Arab countries right across the Gulf. As far as what this means for the United States, Russia and China have not intervened directly yet, although that has been something kind of rumored and gossiped about. Hasn't happened yet. They are, I would say, tangentially involved, either by sending shipments of supplies, weapons to Iran, or in Russia's case, presumably, allegedly, they've been providing intelligence to Iran to help them target U.S. troops and military installations around the Middle East. So that's not good, but that's something that, of course, I'm sure we'll talk more about. Again, we're just going to have to come back to all this because we just don't have time to unpack all of this today. The last thing that I'll say is that one big linchpin as far as what happens next and where this might go in the future is the energy market. We're starting to see on both sides of this conflict an increased willingness to target different forms of energy infrastructure like oil refineries, pipelines, ships. I mean, in Iran's case, definitely trying to close the Strait of Hormuz and prevent any shipping from shipping oil out of the region to different parts of the world, especially Asia. And that's pretty massive. I mean, the global economic impact of a prolonged conflict, if energy infrastructure continues to be a target on both sides of this conflict, pretty significant. And it raises some pretty important questions about what are the costs of this conflict on both sides and who is willing to accept higher costs. What does that mean in terms of the ultimate outcome of the war? Yeah, some pretty important questions there. We don't have answers today, but all that to say, there's a lot going on. We hope that you're going to stay with us over the next few weeks because we do intend to continue providing as much coverage of this war as possible because it really is historic. You'll have to just keep coming back because we're going to take it one bite at a time rather than trying to do everything all in one episode. And we do hope that you will join us again. But for today, just want to say thank you, Olivia, for coming. And it's good to have you back. You know, I have to say, it was kind of ironic. You did one episode as the new co-host, and then you kind of just disappeared for a minute. But it's good that everyone knows why.
Yeah.
I remember texting Olivia a couple of times. Where are you now? I mean, do you think you'll have Wi-Fi tomorrow? Do you know where you're going to be? You know what?
It was always, I had
Don't worry
no
about
clue.
it. Yeah, and the answer was always, okay, it's fine. Don't worry about it. We'll get you back on the podcast when you're back on solid ground. So it's good to have you back, Olivia, and I really appreciate you making time today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Of course. Thank you, Lindsay, for producing this podcast for us as well. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Hope this was entertaining and enlightening at the same time, hopefully, and that you learned something as well. And we look forward to being back with you in a couple of days. We will hopefully have a new episode out for you Thursday, so stay tuned.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Passages Pulse. Help us grow this community by liking, sharing, and subscribing. If you like this week's episode, let us know by leaving a comment below. This podcast is a project of Passages Israel. We exist to educate the next generation of Christians on modern Israel, deepen the roots of their faith, and equip leaders to foster positive Christian engagement with Israel and the Jewish people. To learn more about Passages, follow us on social media or visit us at passagesisrael.org. Until next time, we'll keep our finger on the pulse.